Hello, and welcome to Vision New England's Church in Action podcast. Here we talk with New England leaders about critical issues that impact how Christians engage in our culture to accelerate evangelism.
Hi, I'm Charles Galda. Welcome to the Church in Action podcast. We believe when the people of God do the work of God in unity, it's evangelistic. Jesus talks about that in John 17 and in Matthew 5. And when we do that, people want to know Jesus. That's why Jesus tells us, make disciples, people who are willing to disadvantage themselves to serve others, to fix our communities and the world. And that gives us the opportunity to share Jesus. So on our podcast, we talk about issues of God and culture to accelerate our ability to make disciples who do justice and share Jesus to transform New England. Today, we've got a special guest and friend with us. Pastor Sergio Perez is the senior pastor at Harvest Ministries of New England in Weymouth, Mass. He's also a key leader in New England. He's also the vice chairman of the board of New England. He's also the founder and leader of Copani, which is the Fellowship of Hispanic Pastors of New England, or Confraternidad de Pastores Hispanos de Nueva Inglaterra. Sergio, how'd I do?
Good enough. That's really good.
We had our in-laws are Puerto Rican. They were with us this weekend, and I said something in Spanish, and I didn't do pretty good. It was pretty clear I messed it up entirely. Sergio, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Charles.
It might just help. There's a couple of specific things I want to talk about, especially about how evangelism works in your world and in your context. But before we get to that, I think it's helpful for folks to just know you a little bit better. Do you mind kind of sharing your background a little bit about where you're from, how you came to the U.S., how God called you to New England and ministry?
Wow. Thank you, Charles. But before we get to that, first, as a vice chairman, I want to wear my hat as a vice chairman. I want to thank you, Charles. I want to thank you because I don't know if doing this was part of your job description. I don't think so. And many other things that you have really take on your shoulders. But thank you so much. Thank you for blessing the kingdom of God through this podcast, which has been very enriching for those who have been, following. It's been a lot of great stuff, great conversation, great interviews. So on behalf of Vision New England, thank you very much. Well, to answer your question, trying to summarize it, I love what the great evangelist R.W. Shambach said a long time ago. He said, the faith that I lived, I drank it from my mother's breast. And that's how it was with me. Just growing up before the shadow of this wonderful woman of God, it's been just amazing. So I grew up knowing the Lord, enjoying the Lord as a child. And everything changed when I was around 15, 16, that I decided not to go to church one Sunday. My mom was so confident. It was like, you always go to church, so if you don't feel good, that's fine. You can stay at home. And then the second Sunday, I was like, I don't feel like going to church today, but I know next week I'm going to go. That turned into a 5 years nightmare, really. With the desire of running away from the voice of God through my parents. And I decided to come to Boston because I wasn't really walking right in Guatemala. Where I'm from Guatemala, but I grew up in Central America between Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. And so I decided to come to America because, it was my father's decision. Seeing the way I was living, and it was very dangerous back then in Guatemala. And he said, my son, I love you so much that I'd rather know that you are far away alive than you are here, dead. So why don't you go to America, to United States? And back then, I had some relatives spending some vacation time in Guatemala. And my dad said, you mind, if Sergio go with you? And so I had the visa and everything. And in a matter of a week, literally in a week, we made the decision, and next week I was already here in Boston. So what happened here was that I remember another writer saying, I was running away from my parents, my earthly parents, voice, but began to listen to my Heavenly Father's voice. And that's what happened, by being here, pretty much, I had relatives, but I decided to become independent, in a matter of 6 months. And so I was living by myself. And in those moments, I just began to hear God's voice calling me through different ways. And one day I decided to just read the Bible, not because I wanted to know God's will, but because, back in the day, I was like reading all kind of stuff. I wanted to just get everything I could in my mind. So I knew that the Bible was, it has a lot of wisdom. So I read it because of that. But in one of those reading, oh my goodness, God challenged me. It's like, if you want to win your life, you're gonna lose it later on. But if you think that serving me is like losing now, it's like he came down to my level and he said, like, so if you think that following me is losing, all right, lose it. But then you will win, you will gain later. And that sounds like a challenge to me. And I say, like, all right, sounds good. So I just decided to give my life back to the Lord when I was 20, between 20 and 21. And so that was in 87. And so it's been since then, with that desire. So at the same time that I was like surrendering my life totally to the Lord, it's like along with that, it came that sense of a calling to the ministry. It was like, it was like so deep in my spirit that I knew that by surrendering me to the Lord, it involved also eventually a ministry. So he took me to a journey, being discipled through a great man of God who still is my pastor after 34 years. And I still work with him. And so the time passed, and in 1989, I came back to plant a church here in Boston. So since then, since 89, I've been leading Harvest Ministries.
So you planned to Harvest Ministries 89, so that's 30 plus years ago.
That's right.
That's a great testimony to your faithfulness and what God can do with a prodigal who's running away from him, right?
I was 24. I was single. God was so clear to me. He said, like, you know what? You're gonna go back to Boston. There, you're gonna meet your wife. And I was obedient. I was blessed enough to wait on the Lord and to wait for the right person. And really, it's been, and our story, a little secret for those women that are listening. A little secret is that when I met Joanna, it was one of those things that, it was so God, in our story, because we didn't went out like a regular boyfriend and girlfriend. We didn't date. It was I just speak with her, and I just proposed to her, and then we got married. It was we didn't go out like a regular couple. It was that confidence. And
So did you know her from someplace, or was this the first?
I met her when I came here. I met her when I came here.
So you met her, and so she's going to the same church with you, or?
No, actually, she was going to another church. Her mom was coming to our church.
Okay.
Her mom and her brother. So I visited them once, and she was there. It's very exciting, the whole story. It's very juicy, the whole story. Because when I visited the first time, she was with somebody else. She was like, there was a guy, visiting her, and I didn't think about anything. But then the first time she came to church, the first time, is a very wonderful story. But the first time she came to church, out of respect for her mother had been fasting for 3 days, and my mother-in-law said to the Lord, I'm going to fast for my daughter, but then I'm going to bring her to church, and then it's going to be up to you. I'm going to do my part, and then you do your part. And the very same day that she came to church, in a very humble setting, back in the day, and in that setting, God just poured down His Spirit on her, and she just was submerged in God's love, and it changed her life like completely, because she was going to church, but like a Sunday and like a nominal Christian, pretty much.
Yeah.
But under that visitation of the Holy Spirit, is like everything changed for her, like literally everything changed for her. So I had a chance to baptize her, and part of the story is that when I baptized her, I baptized her and I said, in the name of Jesus, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I commit this life to you, Lord, and to me as well. So I dedicate it to the Lord and to myself.
It is funny when I hear those stories. You and I have a mutual friend who tells a story of how he was dating his wife, right? They were just going out, and he just said to her one night, he said, because he just felt that's where the Lord, that they were going to get married. So he said to me, we're going to get married, right? And she was like, yeah, I know. Those stories are so cool to me that God does that. Right. Now, when you said you heard God say, go back to New England, would you describe that as an audible voice you heard, or was it more of a sense inside you, or how would you describe it?
That's very interesting, because the first years in my walk with the Lord, every time I wanted to experience God in a supernatural way, because I was looking at those testimonies from other people, even my own brother and other people, that they have these great experiences, dreams and visions. Every time I asked God, to show something to me like that, he would say like, no, you meet me at my word. Every time you want to see me, meet me at my word. So every time I wanted to hear God, it was through the word. And that was for so many years, until one night I was praying. It was like mostly talking to God. It was late at night. It was very late Sunday, pretty much like Monday, early in the morning, like at 2 a.m. I was in Guatemala, and just talking to God. And then it was like first time that I saw like a full color vision. And what I saw was, I was coming down from an airplane, going to it wasn't like the regular, at the gate. It was like one of those, you go to those countries or those small, airports that, the plane stops at the middle. And then I was like walking down. I saw myself walking down the stairs from an airplane. I had my Bible in one hand and a guitar on the other hand. And God spoke to me. He said, I'm going to take you back to Boston to preach my word and to restore the ministry of worship, in that area. So I was shocked. I was like, and I told my pastor, I would say, look, I had this experience, and I feel like God is taking me back to Boston. And eventually, that's what happened. So it was like my first time that I had that type of experience where I see things,
And so 1999, you've planted Harvest.
1989.
Yeah. And you planted Harvest, and it's starting to grow. But then you also have a call or a sense that you need to start a fellowship for Hispanic pastors. And so what did that look like? What made you do that? And what is it? And maybe for folks who don't know what Copani is.
Well, 1996 was a very prophetic year for me. It was so many wonderful details. I had this call to pray. I feel like God gave me that grace to pray. But in 1996, I think God led me to a new different level, fasting. And so that year, I did 3 powerful fasts. One of 3 days, completely nothing, no water, nothing. Then in summer, I felt like God's calling me to a 10-day fast, and I did obey. And then after the summer, I felt like God saying, like, I still have something, even greater for you. And in fall of 1996, I felt God calling me to a 21-day fast. So it was a very prophetic year. So in that summer fast, 10-day fast, water only, I was fasting. I was enjoying God. And then almost like at the end of the fast, I had this experience where I was like interceding for New England. Then I began to discern God's, impression, God's voice. And he began to say this to me. He said, like, Sergio, revival is not for one church. because I was praying for revival, revival, revival. And he said, revival is not for one church. And I was like, wow, what are you saying? Revival is for a whole territory. It is for a whole nation. It's not just for one church. And I was like, wow, so what do I do? And he said these words. He said it in Spanish, of course. I'm translating what he said. he said, that's the heavenly language, by the way, you know. But then he said, like, I want you to come down from that blessed pulpit that I have given you, from that blessed ministry, and become friends with my servants in the city. And he began to place in my mind different pastors that I've heard about him. I didn't have any relationship with them because I wasn't taught that way. I wasn't taught that way. I was, you know, the organization that sent me to preach the gospel and just to focus on my ministry. And that's it. So for me to work with other churches, it wasn't really my lingo. It wasn't, you know, my main focus. It wasn't my calling. But out of that experience, where God clearly showed to me that if I really wanted revival, I needed to start sharing with other pastors. And so I began to do that. But the amazing thing was that in some cases, it was just a matter of making a call and, you know, can we get together? That was fine. But in other cases, I have to fix some stuff that I have messed up in the past, you know, by just rejecting invitation from other pastors that wanted to meet me, you know, in the past, things that I said, you know, that it wasn't like the right thing. And, you know, other pastors heard that. So I needed to go back. And for some of those, I had to, you know, apologize and show repentance without knowing that in response, God will just, you know, bring these new relationships into something more intimate and become very close friends with these pastors. And so that went on from 1996 to 2000. And so I remember that before 2000, I just began to, you know, talk to pastors, visit them. They will come to me. We will just have lunch together, have a coffee. And then, you know, we just began to meet like very casual, you know, every month, every 2 months. And they were saying like, why don't we make an association? Why don't we, you know, incorporate this? And God said like, no, we shouldn't. I think the idea was this. If I become friends with other pastors, just the level of respect and the spirituality level in the region is going to just raise, you know, and then we will create this space for God to do whatever he wants to. And I feel like that was God was calling me to do. And so one of those pastors was Dr. Roberto Miranda, and then other pastors. And then, you know, after meeting, one day I invited him to come to my house, you know, just to have dinner together and to pray together. And then we just continue gathering. And then in 2000, God spoke to me and he said, you know, I have given you the blessing of gathering pastors. Now is the time to make something more formal. But the amazing thing is like, but you're not going to be the leader. He spoke to me. He said like, you know, the person who's going to lead from here on is going to be Pastor Roberto Miranda, Dr. Roberto Miranda. So we didn't have like a voting system. It was just like something prophetic. So he became the first president of Copani. So, you know, we pretty much like, I'm the co-founder because when we decided to incorporate it, I was like the vice president. And, but that was God's calling. It was very organic. So he led, you know, Copani for almost 10 years, from the beginning to 2010, the beginning of 2011.
And so today, is Copani more of a relational network, or do you guys collaborate on doing ministry, or is it something else?
Well, Copani, as you said at the beginning, stands for the Hispanic Pastoral Fellowship of New England. So that fellowship continues to be something prophetic that God, instilled at the beginning, and that continues to be. So we gathered before pandemic, we gathered every month, sometimes every 2 months, and then we decided to focus on 4 different areas as part of our business, as part of our main focus, knowing that there are always going to be many needs, in our region. But if we focus in 4 directives, that will give sense of purpose. So we decided to focus on leadership, on youth, migration, anything that has to do with immigration, pretty much, and evangelism. So then that means that every meeting that we had, every retreat that we came up with, it was mainly addressing any of those 4 different areas. And so that was pretty much what we do. We still get together, and in the pandemic, since March, pretty much we started meeting every week to pray for an hour. But also, as we prayed, we experienced God's answering praying, opening doors. And so he began to open doors in an amazing ways. Like, for instance, we started receiving some funding because also with Copani, we decided to work together with Agency Alpha, which is one of the most respectful Christian organizations that has been pretty much addressing the needs of our community when it comes to different areas, especially immigration, but then many other areas. So we partnered together, we've been working together, and God just began to entrust us with funds and provision. So from the very beginning, we started providing from 500, providing food and money to different families. But when it comes to food, it was like we were serving from 500 to 800 families every week, every single week. That was like from March to around September, because in October, we were entrusted with more. We were receiving, we made a partnership with World Vision. Through World Vision, we began to receive, full trailers of food with about 3,000 meals, 3,000 boxes, pretty much for entire family for a week. So we were serving 2,000 here in our facilities in Weymouth, and then another 1,000 boxes in the Worcester area, in Marlborough area. So it's been amazing, and that continues up to now, even now, not only with food but other needs that we're covering, through churches. So it's been amazing. And throughout this, even some of the meetings that we had, we addressed like different forums with Vision New England partnered with us to do a forum when it comes to attending the needs of emotional and mental needs, for the people through the pandemic. So that's been part of what we continue to do. I'm sorry for the long answers.
No, it's a great answer, because it's, the one thing I remember when we first met that we've tried to do is learn from how you did Copani, which is to take time and build relationship. And so don't lurch right into do stuff, right? As we've been rebirthing Vision New England, I remember you said we did nothing for 3 years. And everybody would say, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? And the answer was, we're building relationships.
Yes.
And I think that was, and we're seeing the same thing. We have a group for women in Christian leadership, and Victoria Kovarik, who is doing the exact, even more. She's more patient than I am, right? I said, let's build a relationship. And then we got to action probably a little faster than, right? But Victoria has been investing, and boy, you just watch how that solidifies. God uses those relationships to solidify and do bigger things.
Definitely, because you create trust, then you can share, and just the level of respect that grows out of that is just amazing. It prepares the way for God to do amazing things. I agree with that.
17:21, when the church is one like you and I are one, right?
That's
People
right.
know
That's
God
right.
sent his son.
That's right.
And so let's shift gears a little bit to evangelism. And I'd like to understand, just in your context, and that can be Harvest, but you probably have a broader view because of your work with Copani and some of the other groups you work with. What's effective evangelism look like in your context? Is it, hey, tracts, hey, cold call, hey, sir? What do you do to get a hearing and be able to share Jesus?
Well, I think we were blessed many, many years ago by being exposed to the home groups, small home groups. And I could tell you that I would say that the most aggressive churches, at least Latino churches, they're working with the small home groups, and probably different kinds, different focus, but overall is instead of bringing people to church, is taking the church to people, to different neighborhoods, even with different like context, or by different groups that they have certain common things. And we have tried many, many things when it comes to small groups. We try, like, for instance, groups with like a family groups. We try different nets where just youth get together, just men get together, just women get together. We try different things. But working with small groups have been like the most effective strategies to reach people for Christ, but also to shepherd, to pastor those people. Just because when a church is growing, someone said, some books estimate that the most a pastor can really lead a church when it comes to members is like around 200, and that's why, like, many churches pretty much that's the growth, like overall in America. And so in order for us to attend the people, we need more people involved. So lay people is key for us. And so we attend the needs of the people. We even that help that I was telling you about, by distributing food to the community. We do it in our church through small groups, witnessing people, telling them that, this is something that as a church, we're doing for them in partnership with organizations. But even, Charles, the blessing of the small groups, even in the midst of this pandemic, it was such a great blessing. I don't know how the churches really did, but in our case, immediately after, we heard the first restrictions, we just reinforced the small home groups. I recorded some videos, and so the leaders would show, to the people. Even we taught them how to use Zoom for their own, small groups meetings. And so through the small groups, we continue to engage with the people and to know the needs of the people, and even to testify to others, to invite even friends, to just gather together with us through Zoom. So that has been a great strategy, really. It has worked for so many years, and it's been working in many other churches that I know.
And so you have small groups, just like we might envision them in other churches, where there's some level of disciple making going on, and fellowship and care. But I think I hear you saying something a little bit different too, is that that's the primary place folks are inviting skeptics or unbelievers into a faith community, and folks come.
That was pretty much the change that I implemented many years ago, because for us, small groups were more like discipleship, more like Sunday school, but during the week. Because, as you know, many churches, most independent churches, we didn't have the regular Sunday school, and instead we used, home groups, some type of small groups, to continue that discipleship. So at the beginning, when I started working with small groups, it was mostly like for discipleship. But then we decided to, change some direction, and then to use it also as an instrument to reach out to people. And still, that's the way we do it. Even when we do special events, like special evangelistic events, we reach out people through small groups, especially churches like us, that people need to drive. They drive an average of 35 minutes to come to church. I'm talking about like 90% of our members. So it doesn't really, at this point, doesn't serve per se the immediate community. But most people, they come from, many different cities and towns that they have to drive. So we still continue to reach people through home groups, to small groups.
And so the assumption I make in that is that, I'm in a small group of 6, 8, 10 people, however many is in the group, 12, whatever. And I've got a relationship though with my neighbor. And so I've built a relationship over time, or a coworker or something like that. And I'm inviting them in, and they're willing to come. And now they start to experience a faith community, and now they hear about Jesus. And that's interesting, because that's, I'm not sure I hear as many stories about folks using their small groups that evangelistically.
Oh, that's great. I mean, it is great, because imagine people who have some prejudice, or, some bad experiences, or they don't want to go to a Protestant church, or whatever Christian church.
Because I assume, just coming from a Latino culture, you're going to have a lot of ex-Catholics.
That's right. Exactly. That's right. And interesting because one of the largest churches in Colombia is called Charismatic Church, but is Protestant. But in a way, it was a very a strategic move, that apparently got inspired to the pastor because of that. And in our countries, it's a bit different than what you experience here between Protestants and Catholics. Over there is more like there's more rivalry that you see here, and like opposing each other. So in our countries, really, it has been a great blessing, because you don't go to that church, for the first time. You visit a house. Sometimes we gather in, in parks. For instance, in summer, the creativity is amazing, because sometimes we gather, outside. We gather in parks. We gather, we go somewhere else. So, especially the youth gets more creative, So in that sense, it's very appealing, for friendly seekers.
Gotcha. And so let me shift gears again, because I always find this interesting. I always think about how we all evolve in our understanding of God over time, which means our theology is evolving. And so where are some places you look back over your Christian faith journey? What has changed in your theology over the years? And what did that change look like? How did you go through that?
Wow. Well, I could say two things, but maybe I only have time for one. Well, I think the first one that I thank God for it, because the way that I grew up, ministerially speaking, not only as since I was a child, but in the ministry, that was the way I was discipled. I wasn't taught that the church needed to break that dichotomy between the sacred and the secular, the private and the public. It was the church needed to be just doing church. Don't deal with government issue. Don't deal with politics. Don't deal with, that's for other people. Politics are dirty, and so I grew up with that mentality that we just needed to be quiet when it comes to, the truth, or what we believe is right, or, things like that. So it's been a journey. It's been a journey. and I still see it in a lot of many friends and pastors that I know, especially coming from Central and South America, because that's pretty much the gospel that we were taught. And so in that sense, I think my theology has changed. Now I see, now I value someone like Joseph in Egypt, someone like Daniel, with all the empires and being an advisor to the kings, and Esther being an influence. And so I see now the importance that church break that dichotomy between those two different areas, and just to live our values wherever we are, not to live it on Sunday and then living on Sunday in church and then Monday is a whole different thing, but just to continue that belief, those values throughout the rest of the week. So in that sense, I think he has. I had evolved to the point that when my pastor sees me, because I tell everything that I do, and like for instance, I have been in the State House, testifying about different bills, for my community, but also when it comes for life issues. So I have been there, representing my community and our values, and I tell my pastor, look, I just want you to, I want you to know what I'm doing. I don't expect you to do the same, because actually he doesn't do it. He didn't see things the way that I, saw later on, and so by me being involved when it comes to those decisions, and even with government and engaging pretty much with those changes, that's something that he still sees like, well, God is calling you to do that. I bless you, don't expect me to do the same. And I said, no, I know that, but I think that I value and I see the importance of the church engaging also in those arenas. So that's been one. And the other one, I think, is that it was the same thing that we learned growing up in churches in Latin America. We weren't exposed to that, what I call the horizontal gospel. We always were good at the vertical gospel, relationship with God, being life, being saved. But that horizontal gospel, we were good at loving God, but loving our neighbors, we didn't know how to do it. We always had a good excuse. We didn't have, in our country, we didn't have the funds to do it. And that's something that has changed also throughout the years, that the cross, for me, amplifies, represent that full gospel, the vertical and the horizontal, loving God, loving our neighbors, justice, but mercy also, so I think that has also involved, and it's something that I also, report to my pastor, but he's like, go on, you continue doing that, but, don't expect me to do it, but it seems like it's from God. So I think that's something that has evolved also from the very beginning.
Those are two great areas. We so often we compartmentalize, right, our work life and our family life and our church life, and that's not biblical at all. That's a great point. I think a lot of us need to evolve in that thinking more. We're gonna have Brandon Cobb, who's a pastor, who's actually a New York pastor, but he's part of Vision New England, and he does a lot of work on the theology of work. And how God gives us work to do to bless other people. So we're going to try and step into that a little bit more in a few weeks.
Charles, I'm sorry, the application of that, I want to forget that the application of that is that in the past, we somehow taught the people that in order for them to serve God, like the ultimate way to serve God, it was in full-time ministry. And people who didn't reach that, point of serving God full time, they will feel frustrated and they will feel like, oh my God, I'm not serving God. And that's one of the greatest application of this understanding, this theology, is that no way. I mean, God wants to use you where you are. and I've had experiences where God used me to intervene, like for instance, my niece wanted to become a doctor. She lives in Mexico, and then she wanted to drop school because it was getting tough. And then I arrived at the right moment. And I said, look, I think God wants to use you because you wanted to serve God, in ministry. And I said, I think you need to continue. You need to finish your school, your medical school, because God is going to give you a different platform that you will not have unless you become a medical doctor. She, to the point, she's so grateful. She said, Uncle Sergio, I thank God for your life because you came at the right time when I needed to hear that. And I encourage many people, don't think that working in full-time ministry, that's it, there are some people in full-time ministry that they don't dedicate the proper time to spend with the Lord. They're just so caught up in business. And so that has been a great blessing to know that God has called some to become lawyers, doctors, engineers, business people. Those are great asset for the kingdom of God. So that's a lot of stuff in there.
It's a great point, and your point on loving our neighbors is a good one too, because we, I remember being in a conversation one time where the person was saying, well, of course I love my neighbors, and the other person was like, what's their first names? And now some of us are really good on this point, some of us aren't as good. And how many kids do they have? Right? What do you know about them that you didn't get from waving by to them as you drive by their house? You're like, okay, that's convicting. I don't know that I can say I love my neighbor if I don't know some basics about them and spend some time with them. And that is an area where I think a lot of us, and I point the finger at me too, need to get better at that. So thanks for sharing that. Let me give you an opportunity to share. What's one cool story you've seen God do lately that sticks out in your memory?
Last Sunday. Well, first of all, I got my wife back because, many people don't know, but after 6 months of my wife taking care of her mom in Puerto Rico, it wasn't like 6 months, like completely, because I went there a couple of times and then she came back for a few days, but overall it was 6 months. So she's finally back after the passing of my mother-in-law, which for me was such a great satisfaction I was seeing my wife being split between wanted to serve her wonderful and beautiful mother and wanted to be with us. And it was breaking my heart. And I said, I need to make that decision. So I told her, look, you need to go. You need to be with your mom and just, release her to do that. And for her was such a blessing. So anyway, she's back. So she's back. And so she's been back like for the past 3 weeks already. But Sunday, because seeing my daughter leading worship in our 3 services and my son preaching the word, it was, I don't know if it was God's anointed or it was just my father's heart, but it was just amazing. My son came back from Oxford. He was finishing his doctorate degree over there. He's still finishing her last year from here because of the pandemic and the limitations over there. So he recently came back. They had their first baby here, in Boston. So because of that, we were giving him the time to focus on, the baby. So after many months, it was like the first time that he came back to the pulpit to preach. So it was amazing. I love when he preaches. I just really, enjoy that so much. So seeing my daughter, seeing my son, being my wife, what else can I ask? But it was a powerful message. I love to hear him preaching, really. I'm a fan of his.
That sounds like a great blessing.
Isn't that a cool story?
That is. That's a great blessing. Having your grandchild, right? That's all by itself is enough. Having your 2 kids home, that's enough, right? Now pile it all on top, and he's preaching and she's leading worship. That's a great testimony to you and Joanna as faithful parents too, and God then working through that. And so thanks for sharing that. Got a few lightning round questions just to help folks get to know you better. What's your favorite verse?
Wow. Oh my goodness. I would say that a very significant verse, that even it was the verse that my mom wrote on that Bible when I was still away from the Lord. He sent me a Bible when I was here in Boston. She sent it from Guatemala. And that verse of Psalms 37:4, delight yourself in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. So meaningful, so powerful. And I think I've been living that, delighting myself in the Lord, and then he takes care of the rest.
That's great. That's great. Hero in the Bible.
Well, between David, Joseph, and Paul, the Apostle Paul, I would say that Joseph, I don't know if he's my hero, but he's been the character that God has used throughout my life since I surrendered my life to the Lord, that we have similarities with Joseph in many different ways. Even the way that I got married, it was because of that. God showed me Joseph. Look, Joseph didn't get married until he began pretty much his ministry, in Egypt. So I think Joseph has been a very important character for my life in ministry.
Cool. Hero not in the Bible.
Hero not in the Bible. Oh my goodness. Hero not in the Bible. Oh my goodness. Well, when I was a kid, interesting, I loved Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was my hero. He was my hero, to the point that I'm the only Latino that doesn't play soccer. I don't play soccer, which is, I should be ashamed of that, but my thing was martial arts. That was my life, and that was my hero. I follow him. And the reason I mention it is because, I still here and there, I still, go back, because obviously so many years, so I don't follow him, as I used to, but here and there. So recently I've been reading some of the stuff that his daughter was writing, so trying to connect again with my old hero.
Cool. And a book you're reading now?
I'm catching up. I'm catching up with gifts. My son gave me Paradise Lost and the Divine Comedy, which those are books that I think readers should read, but I haven't read them, so I'm catching up. I'm very slowly. Plus, I don't know if I should say this, but I'm reading Chronicles of Narnia. I'm about my 4th book, just because also my son is sort of an expert on C.S. Lewis, so I'm still catching up with C.S. Lewis stuff.
And I didn't read Narnia when I was a kid, so I didn't read it till I was an adult too.
Oh, really?
And I don't read much nonfiction. And I'm like, fiction. And I'm like, it's pretty good. I liked it.
the way my son explains it to me is that fiction is just like muscle other areas of your mind, that is very important for critical thinking and for other things. So, and because for me it was like it wasn't that appealing, but then I see the power, and the value of those type of readings. Yes. Yeah. So I'm in like my 4th book of the Narnias.
Oh, cool. And so favorite movie? I'm going to guess you're going to pick a Bruce Lee one then.
Used to, but no, I think favorite genre is war movies and drama. No brainer for me. Every time I have extra time, drama. So war movies are like legendary movies, has to do with war. Like, for instance, like, Braveheart is a must see. I love Gladiator, especially the first movies. But there's a reason why I like those movies. Saving Private Ryan. But one of the favorite movies also are musicals. The family, I think family favorite music is The Fiddler on the Roof.
Okay, yeah.
And you know what? I don't know if you watched The Fiddler on the Roof. That was like the #1 family movie, and we were lucky enough or blessed enough to go to take my family to see the play here in Boston with Topo, with the main character that did the Fiddler on the Roof. It was the last tour. So it was just amazing to see him. I mean, once he came out of the theater to the platform, everybody was so happy and celebrating because he was like the last tour seeing him.
Oh, that's cool. So I know you think so Westerns are my thing, more pictures are my thing, and so I know you think I'm much too butch to like musicals, but musicals are my thing too.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. And so I grew up. My son has no interest in them, but my daughter and I would always sit and watch musicals together, and it's all the old stuff. So Meet Me in St. Louis. By the Light of the Silvery Moon, right? American in Paris, right? All those old ones.
Right.
So yeah.
My son was still in Oxford, and I visited him, and I took him to watch The Greatest Showman.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Wow, that was such a great, I mean, it was the script was really good."
We know our musical theater here too.
Right. Yes.
And so favorite hymn.
Yep. A contemporary one that is, I'm not too musical.
Okay.
When it comes to, I'm like, for instance, if I'm in the car, I don't listen to music. I read it. I hear a preaching or teaching or something like that. I'm not too musical, but when it comes to worship at the service, oh my goodness, that's my favorite thing to do. And here and there is a song that really impacts my heart. So the number one in top 10 right now is So I Will. I think it's by Hillsong or something, but I don't know who made it, but it's been like in the top 10 right now. I hear it. It's like a poem. I want, for me, it's hard to learn the lyrics. So I was waiting, to repeat some phrases, of the chorus, but no, it's like a whole poem from the beginning to the end. So it's so hard. So I've been enjoying listening to it.
Cool. Well, Sergio, thank you for the opportunity for our folks, our listeners, to get to know you better. Thank you for your faithful service at Harvest, your faithful service to Copani, our partnership, and our friendship. I'm just really grateful to you. You bless me all the time, and I want to thank you for that. And so,
thank you, Charles. No, thank you. I appreciate it. It was a great moment. Thank you for not getting me so nervous.
I enjoyed our chat. I think it was a great time. So thank you for spending time with us.
Awesome.
And thank you, our audience. I hope you heard something in what Sergio shared with you that advanced your understanding about evangelism or making disciples, or how to reach your neighbors, and how to use your small groups more effectively, and how God moves in our lives. Whatever it is, I'm sure God gave you something from it. And I hope you felt blessed by Sergio the way he's blessed me. I'd like to also thank Bob Atherton, our producer. And next week, we're going to continue our series with the Reverend Dr. Ray Hammond and Pastor Enoch Lau, where we're talking about working from our theology to our political positions, and then showing that we can disagree with each other on those positions and still treat each other with love and respect. And the topic this next week will be the data and the fear around police violence, and trying to balance out those two pieces of the conversation. So thanks for being with us. See you next time.
Thank you for joining the podcast today. If you'd like to learn more about Vision New England and what God is doing in our region, check out our website at visionnewengland.org. We hope you'll join us next time for the Church in Action podcast.